this is another method that we can use when they're not factorable. So quadratics are not always factorable, right? We found that out in chapter 8. Sometimes we have prime ones. Well, one method that we can do to solve those was that square rooting method we just learned and we just discussed. Another method we're going to learn today, which is one of 3 methods we're learning this chapter. We learned the square rooting one. We're learning completing the square today. We'll learn another one on Friday as well. But this method, completing the square, we'll talk about what that means, why it's called that, and how to do it. So for starters, if we have this polynomial x squared plus 6x plus 9, we can factor that. Okay? We can factor that. How would we factor a trinomial? What do we do for trinomials factor?
Make the x chart.
Okay. Look for a GCF and then we make an x, right? Okay, do we have a GCF?
Yes.
No. Okay, we don't have a GCF for any of these actually. Okay. But we look for the first one, and so we say, okay, what would go at the top of our x? 9. 9 times 1 is 9, and what goes at the bottom? 6. We need 2 positive numbers that multiply to 9 out of 6. What are we thinking? 3 and 3? I thought that was you saying maybe you have it. Okay. So 3 and 3. Now, would we be able to use our shortcut here?
Yes.
Okay, so how would we write that? X plus 3 and x plus 3. Just follow the signs that we have here. Now, is this the same thing? So we could write x plus 3 squared, right? Hey, notice how it's x plus blank squared? What do you think we're going to write this blank?
3.
What? No way. It's almost like someone was prepared for that to happen. Cool. Yeah. Funny how it would be like that. Yeah. So this ended up being what we call a square, x plus 3 squared. Okay? So we made a square. There's a square there. Okay? It's squared because it's being squared. Okay? I said square like 20 times. Okay? Hey, so this next one, we can do the same thing, right? Factor it. What goes on the top? What goes on the bottom?
8.
2 positive factors of 16 that add up to 8.
4.
Can we use our shortcut?
Yeah.
What are we going to have? X plus 4 and which would be the same thing as x plus 4 squared. So what goes in this blank?
4.
Okay. Are we noticing any sort of pattern right now?
Next one is 5.
Whoa. How are you going to know that though, Jacob?
Because 5 plus 5, or negative 5 plus negative 5 is negative 10. And negative 5 plus negative 5.
Okay, so before we had 4 plus 4 is 8. 4 times 4 is 16. 3 plus 3 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. Now Jacob's saying this one's negative, but if we have negative 5 plus negative 5, that gives negative 10. And negative 5 times negative 5, that gives positive 25. So would that work?
Yes.
Ben, what are you thinking?
I was just going to say the square root of the third number in the polynomial is always the answer for the x. Or the thing
You got it.
Wow.
Ben's saying the square root of this third number. So the square root of 9 was 3. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 25 is 5. How do we know whether it's going to be positive or negative, though? What was the difference there?
The first number is negative.
The first, this number was negative?
No, the second number.
Oh, the second term. Okay, this one was positive, so this one was positive. This one was positive, so this was positive. This one was negative. This one was negative. Now, here's a little curveball. Okay, what do we think would happen if we had something like this, where we had, I don't know, x squared plus, let's go with 10x plus 9. Okay, so here. Would this still work out to where it's going to be x plus 3 squared?
No.
Okay, so what's the difference between this and this? Why would this work out to be this perfectly, whereas this would end up being something more like this?
The middle term is
Those are both not factors.
Like in the other ones, both numbers can be
9 is
factored
prime.
by that.
Wait, they both can't be
Just like
square rooted.
8x plus 16. 4 would go into 8x.
Okay, so Graydon's saying 4 can go into 8 and 4 can go into 16, so that might be something here. Okay, whereas 3 can go into 6 and 3 can go into 9. Just can 3 go into 10? Okay. How much is 6 compared to 3?
Twice.
Twice. How much is 8 compared to 4? How much is negative 10 compared to negative 5?
So just divide the second number by 2.
Okay, so we can divide the second number by 2 or square root the last one. So here, notice how this one ends up being x minus 7 squared. What's negative 14 divided by 2? What's 49? What's the square root of that? 7. So to know whether it's positive or negative, we look at this one. Okay. Okay. So let's continue on. Okay. Here, how can we figure out what's going to go in here?
Divide negative 20 by 2.
Okay. So negative 20 divided by 2
It's positive 10.
is negative 10. And so where's this negative 10 going to go?
You're gonna multiply by yourself and then put it in the C spot.
Okay, we're going to multiply by itself. What do we call it when we multiply something by itself? Squaring. Okay. So then we're going to take negative 10. We're going to square it. And what is negative 10 times negative 10? 100, right? Do the little emoji too, okay? And so what's going to go in this parenthesis? And it's a negative 10, right? So is that the same number before we squared it? Okay. So we took half of the b term, because remember, polynomial, ax squared for quadratic plus bx plus c, right? Took half of the b term, and that ended up being in the parenthesis, right? Or the square root of this c term ended up being in the parenthesis with the sign of b. So what are we going to do if it's x squared plus 16x plus blank? How are we going to know what goes in this blank, and how are we going to know what goes in this blank?
I know what I was.
Okay, Blake, go ahead.
Alright, so you divide 16 minus 5. Right? Good. Try to find half.
Okay, so divide it by 2, and we get
8.
Okay, so what are we going to do with this 8? Plug it in.
No, you're gonna square it.
Okay, so now we take 8, we square it. What do we get? 64. Okay, what do we do with that?
Then you put 64 in the B, C spot.
Okay, we put 64 in this C spot where the C would go,
And then 8 in the.
and 8 goes in this parenthesis.
Yep.
Okay, and if we were to work out this out and factor it, we would work this one out and factor it, we would get that too. Okay, so let's hypothesize how this would continue to look. Let's hypothesize how this would continue to look. Because do we have a number here?
Gonna have to get that positive.
Do we have a number here for B? No, here we had a number. We had a number. Here we just have the variable B, just a placeholder, so to speak. So what did we do with this B? So what are we going to do with this B? Okay, so B over 2.
And multiply.
This would be b over 2 and then parentheses.
Okay, so B over 2 would be in the parentheses. Oh, you're talking about this, or are you talking about something else?
No, like, since you have to square root it, you can't really square root it, so you have to
Okay, what did we do after we divided B by 2? What did we do here with 8, and what did we do over there with negative 10? We squared it. So does it make sense to do that same thing? Okay. Now when we square it, this is really like B over 2 times B over 2, right?
That's what I was talking
So it's B squared over 4.
So B times B is B squared, and 2 times 2 is 4. So we end up having B squared over 4. So what would go here?
B squared over 4.
Okay. So even though we don't know the number, did we figure out what would go there?
Yes.
Okay. And what goes in this parenthesis?
B squared. Or B over 2.
B over 2. So, what I want you guys to notice is in this pattern we have, we are taking whatever B was, dividing it by 2, and that goes in our parenthesis, and to figure out what goes in this blank, we're going to square whatever B divided by 2 was. Even if that's just B over 2, literally B over 2. Whether that's 16 over 2, negative 10, or negative 20 over 2, or B over 2. We're going to do that every time. So can somebody try and walk me through this last one that we have in this table? Okay, Ben, I'm going to have you help me out with this one.
Okay, so you do 7. So half of 7 is 3.5.
Okay. Let's just keep it as a fraction for now. I think that'll be easier for us.
So.
Just 7 over 2.
That's it.
Okay, so what now? What do you have to divide that by 2?
You square it.
Okay, so we're going to take the 7 over 2, just like we did B over 2, and we're going to square it. And Ben said it. Ben suggested turning it into decimal. I'm going to say, let's try not, because I think it's much easier for us to square it when it's not a decimal. Okay, I think it's much easier for us to square it when it's not a
Can
decimal.
you just plug it in the calculator?
Yeah, but this way we don't need a calculator. And we probably won't have a calculator on this part. Yeah, I'm a meathead.
I'm joking.
It's okay just joking, Mr. Basil. So, what would be 7 times 7? So 49 would be on the top, and what would be on the bottom? 4. 2 times 2. So what do we do with this 49 over 4? Put it in this first blank. Okay. And how do we know it goes here? It was whatever b divided by 2 was, right? And it's whatever the square root of our c was.
And now it's hard.
Questions on this pattern?
You always just. It's true. They start with easy than next.
Okay, so this is a really cool pattern I really like, and I really like how this, you guys, it was clicking for you guys. It was awesome, okay? Does anybody need a little more explaining on this? Because if you do, that's perfectly fine. I want to make sure everybody understands this pattern we're seeing here. Okay, so what we did was we quote unquote completed the square. So we started off with x squared minus 20x plus, and if we put any other number in here besides 100, we wouldn't have gotten something where it was something squared. It wouldn't have happened. If we put any other number in that blank besides 100, we wouldn't have gotten something squared. We'd have gotten just 2 other random factors, or maybe not even anything that could factor. What we did was we created a square, and we quote unquote completed the square. The start of a square was there, and we said, well, let's complete it. Let's finish it off. Let's put the right number here, and then let's make this square. And something being squared. That's where that name comes from. Questions on that name? Does that name kind of make sense? Completing the square. So we had the start of the square here, this x squared minus 20x plus blank. We didn't know how to finish it. If we put any other number besides 100 there, it wouldn't have made a square. It wouldn't have made something squared as a factor. But here, because we put 100 in there, we completed the square, and so we're able to do x minus 10 squared as our factors. Because otherwise, we would get some other factors or no factors at all. Right, Jacob?
Yeah.
Okay, make sure that head's up, please. Thank you. Okay, so right below this, to solve equations that are not factorable, we can complete the square to get them into that form where they are factored already. So to solve equations that are not factorable, we can complete the square to make them factorable. And so that's what we're going to practice, okay? So we have these 5 steps we're going to follow, and I'm going to talk through them real quick, and then we're going to actually start walking through those. Okay, kind of a typical process for us, I believe. Okay? So our first step is to move C so it's alone on the right side. Okay, so before last chapter, we often moved everything over so it was all on the same side and we had 0 on the other side. Does that ring a bell, right? Okay, we had like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We loved it equaling 0. Right now it doesn't have to. Okay, we actually want it to equal c. We want c by itself. We want nothing in this area. We want a blank there. Okay, and then step 2, we'll literally put a blank line on each side. We're going to add in a blank line on each side. Okay? And we'll talk about 3, 4, and 5 as we continue to go through. But I want to start through those first steps, just to make sure we understand this tangible. Bless you and bless rain down after us forget. Bless you and bless rain down after us forget. Okay?
Whoa.
So in this first step, we say our first step is to move C so it is alone on the right side. What is our C term right now?
0.
Negative 4 is already on the right side, okay? It's already over here. And so is C already by itself? Yes. So we have only our variables on our left side. So for this setup, we want the variables on the left side, and that's it. So we already have that first step checked off. What's our second step say?
Put a blank line on each side.
Put a blank line on each side. So just like right before, we had like x squared minus 20x plus blank. We're going to do that same kind of thing. We're going to do x squared plus 10x plus blank equals negative 4 plus blank. So I want you to write that in there. It's always going to be plus blank. Because, green, positive, 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 regardless of these other signs. Because anytime you square something, it's going to be positive.
Why are we writing
Leave it on the other side.
So we put a blank line on each side. Okay? Step 3, add the square of half the coefficient of the middle term to both sides. Okay, all it's saying, the coefficient of the middle term. What's our middle term? B. So we're just saying add half of B, add the square of half B, so B over 2 squared. Didn't we just do that before? Where we took whatever B was, divided by 2 and squared it? That's what we put in the blanks earlier, right? Like over here we said negative 20, we said, oh, well, half of that, B divided by 2, is negative 10, and squared it. 16, half was 8, squared it, 64. B over 2, squared it, B squared over 4. Half of 7 was 7 over 2, squared it, 49 over 4. We're going to do that same thing. So here, what's our B? What's our B? 10. So we take 10 divided by 2, and what do we do with that 5? We square it now. So we take 5 squared and we get 25. So what are we going to put in this blank? 25. And I'm actually going to write that in a different color just so we know.
I'm a little confused.
I'm going to ask you to wait 1 second, okay? And let's see it. Let's get through it and let's see how we feel after that, okay? I think you're saying that though. So it says we're going to add it to just one side, or what's it say? Both sides. And here's the thing. Can we just go adding things to one side of an equation and say that's okay? No, we always have to do it to both sides, don't we? So that's why we put a blank on both sides. Because we're gonna, if we add 25 to this side, we're gonna add 25 to this side as well. Because we gotta keep it balanced. We have to keep it balanced. Okay? So that was step 3 there for us. This really wordy one, which is really just b over 2 squared and adding it. So 4 says back to the left side as a square of a binomial. We had this earlier. What does this end up being as our factors? Okay, so here was the polynomial, and here was the factor. So we end up having these factors on the right side, but right now we're not going to put it on the right, so we're going to put it beneath it. Because we said this turns into this by factoring. 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 This turns into this by factoring, so on and so forth. All of these turn into the second part by factoring. So how would we factor this left side, x squared plus 10x plus 25? Okay, but did we have to do that x? Did we have to make the x every time on these?
No.
We ended up just.
Oh no, you square root the c term and then you give that x plus whatever equals.
So what would it be here?
So x plus 5 in parentheses and that's the square root plus 5.
Yeah.
Where'd you get the 5 from?
Okay.
The square
So-
root of 25 is 5.
The square root of 25, and it's also the number before we squared it. So we already have the 5. So just like before, okay, I'm going to keep running back to this. Just like before, on like this one right here where my pen's at right now, if you everyone what's up where my pen's at right now, okay? When we divided b by 2, we got negative 10. That negative 10 went right into that parenthesis, went right into our factor. We also squared that negative 10, and that's what went on our line. So here, when we divide this b by 2, we divide 10 by 2, this 5. That's exactly what's going to go in that parenthesis, every time. And then you square it as well, and that's what goes on the blanks. Because we're saying x squared plus 10x plus 25 is x plus 5 all being squared. But we had to add 25 to both sides to make that happen. We had to complete the square. And we say, okay, well now on the right side, what's negative 4 plus 25? 21. We just add them. Just combine like terms, add them. That'd be our step 4. We factor the left side as the square of a binomial 2-term. So now from here, this just says solve the quadratic equation simplified. How do we solve this? We square root both sides, because do we already have a squared term isolated? So this leads right back into where we just came from, right, Hannah? Exciting, right? Yeah.
No.
Okay. So what would the square root of x plus 5 all being squared be? X plus 5. Do we know the square root of 21? Not off the top of our head. We can write positive or negative square root of 21, right? write that?
Yes.
Okay, is x by itself yet?
No.
How do we do that then?
Minus 5 both sides.
Very good. And how do I write that? What do I put first?
Minus 5.
-5 plus or minus the square root of 21. Now, can we combine these two anymore?
Kind of.
Like right now, without a calculator, can we combine these anymore? So this would be what kind of answer? Exact answer. You know what? And we're only gonna do the exact answer right now. We're not even gonna do the approximate. We're not gonna mess with that right now. Okay. Questions on that one?
Wait, so since we have the square root, that's why we didn't have to make the two separate equations.
Well, we have really two here. We just wrote them as one with this positive negative. We could separate the equations,
No, but like why we didn't like figure out two equations. Like
because
why we didn't get two answers.
well, this is two answers though. It's still two answers. Okay, Grace, if it makes you more comfortable, you could write it like this. It's just more writing. You could write it x equals -5 plus square root of 21, and x equals -5 minus square root of 21. Same thing. These two would combine to be that same thing.
Yeah,
But can we solve this anymore without using a calculator?
That's what I was asking.
Can we solve it anymore without a calculator? No. So that'd be finding the approximate answer. And I just said, well, we'll just find the exact answer right now.
You say right now, so that makes me sad.
I mean, we can. Okay. We're going to try the second one as well. So, our first step says to move C. Let me check off step 5. Okay, our first step says move C so it is alone on the right side. Do we have to do that step this time? Yeah, what's our C that we have to move? 3. How do we move that thing? You add 3 to both sides, right? So we have x squared minus 4x is equal to 3. Okay? So that's the first step. We move C so it's alone on the right side. We have only our x's on our left side. And what's the next step say? Put a blank line on each side. So we have x squared minus 4x plus blank is equal to 3 plus blank. Did we do that second step? Okay, I'm going to do a different color for this one. So, how do we know what to put on that blank? Just random?
Square root.
We take our b, which is -4, and we divide by 2. And we get -2. But does -2 go on this blank? No, what would? -2 squared, which is 4. So you put 4 here, and if you add 4 to one side of the equation, you have to add 4 to the other side. And so now we quote-unquote completed the square. We made this into a square. And so now we factor this on step 4. We now factor this left side. Can anybody tell me what our factor would be? Graydon? No. No. Close. X, not plus, minus 2 squared. Okay? Let's look at this. What number did we have after we divided b by 2? -2. That's what goes there. Every time. Every time, that's what goes there. Whatever b divided by 2 was, that's what goes there. 100% of the time. That way we already know what sign it is. Exactly. If it's b is negative, it's negative. If it's positive, it's positive. Whatever half of b is, that goes there. So when you do this whole little thing where you take b divided by 2 and you square it, you use both of those numbers. We use b divided by 2 in the parentheses. and we use whatever the squared version is on those blank lines. We use both of them. Okay, just like Native Americans used every part of the animal when they hunted them, we're just going to use every single part of this process. Okay. What is 3 plus 4 on that right side?
7.
We did step 4.
Wait, what? How do you get 7?
3 plus 4.
Oh.
Okay. Now, is this starting to look like an equation we had earlier today or from last week? I think so. Okay. Derek, what would you do? Okay. So if I just showed you this earlier today, we said, okay, we look for the squared term. What is being squared? No? Not just that. What's in the parentheses? Is that all being squared? So what's being squared? X minus 2. Is the squared term already isolated? Okay, so what are you going to do if the squared term is isolated? How do we get rid of the square? Right, we get rid of, what operation do we do to undo it? Nope, division undoes multiplication. Multiplication undoes division. We're trying to undo a square though. What undoes a square? Okay, what did we do on the previous example? We had something squared. What did we do? Let's try to. We square root. A square root undoes it. So we square root both sides. And then there, what would you be left with? X minus 2. And do we know what the square root of 7 off the top of our head? No. We can write positive or negative square root of 7. Okay. This one doesn't terminate now. Now is x by itself yet? Nope, we have to get it there. Okay. Well then, what do you do to get x by itself?
Subtract plus the thing beside it to the other side.
Okay. So in this case, it's a negative 2. So how do we get it across?
Plus 2 on each side.
Add 2 to each side. And write that positive 2 first. So x equals 2 plus or minus square root of 7. Now, if we're just doing the exact answer, not approximate, are we done? Cool. And we have 2 answers because we have this plus or minus. That really is 2 answers. Devin, Hannah, please. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. Questions on that? Okay. Let's go down right below. Let's do a little more you guys on this one versus me, okay? I'm going to have you guys lead it. So what's our first step, Ben?
Move C.
Move C to the other side. Is it already there?
No. Alright, yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay, that's dang. Okay, we did the first step. What's our second step, Sam? Put a blank on each side, okay? X squared plus 6x plus blank is equal to 18 plus blank. Okay, we did our second step. Justin, what's our third step?
We're gonna B over 2 squared.
Okay, we take b over 2. What is b?
6.
Take 6 over 2, we get
3.
3. So we're going to take 3 and square it, and we get 9.
9.
And so what goes on the blank? What goes on this blank?
Square. 3 squared.
Which is the same thing. We add the same thing to both sides. Same thing to both sides.
On the last one you had 20.
Not on the second blank. It was 4 on both blanks. Okay. Okay. So now, what do we do after we do that? Who can help me know what to do after that?
So you can combine 18 plus 9.
Factor the left side.
Both of those are true. We're going to factor the left side and we're going to combine the right side. So on the left side, how do we factor this blank?
Oh, yeah.
Anybody help me know what to do here? Sam, you got it?
You square root it, don't you?
Not quite yet. We got to factor it first. So what do we do for our factors here? Remember we have this shortcut we were able to do right now? Williams?
X plus 3 squared.
Very good. Okay, we take this x and we take half of b plus 3. We take this b that we found. Just like the Native Americans with animals, we're going to use every part. We use this, we 3, you don't just throw it away. We're saying, hey, we're going to use that here in this parenthesis. Okay, now we combine like terms on the right side. Like Grace said, what's 18 plus 9? 27. Now this looks a lot familiar. Christian, what do? Square root both sides. Undo that square. What do we have on the left side here at Kale? X plus 3. On the right side, do you know the square root of 27? Yes, what do we write? Plus or minus, positive, negative, square root of 27. Okay, are we done yet, Betsy? I agree, what do? Good math move. Tell me what's right. Exactly right. And we'd be done if we're just finding the exact answer. Now, if we're finding the approximate, could we go further? Sure. But we're just finding the exact right now.
This is too much math for my brain.
What?
No. This is easy.
My brain is fried already.
Okay. I want you guys to try this second one. I want you guys to try the second one, okay? I want you guys to start trying on the second one. Okay? And if you're done or you have questions, I want you to raise your hand, okay, to ask. Okay? And this will help you. It's true. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. That's how we faction this. So in this table, we said that it always ended up being whatever variable we had. So in this case, it was always x, just x, again. And it was whatever half of 8 was. So do we just have one of those? There you go. What do you do to this side too? Yes. Wait. Close. Okay. So, what's happening here? So it goes in this parentheses. So like here, we had 4 divided by 2. Yeah. This negative is factoring the positives. Does that make sense? So this one positive? Yes. Yep. Then you're good. What did you get? What did you get? Full. This is correct. This is wrong there. But you subtract 4, you subtract 2. I mean,
Sorry. I was looking at that.
yeah,
There you go. Thank you for that.
Like our passes, we've had multiple ones where like it literally goes like 10 yards and we pass it up, like double pass it, so spiky. We beat Mr. Weissman. You guys are better than Josh.
Yeah, we got some. I killed so.
Attention up here, please. Attention up here, please. Okay. So on this one, our first step, is our first step already done for us?
Yeah.
That's nice. Okay, so what's our second step? Put a blank. Put a blank on each side. We write it with a blank on each side. Now we gotta fill those blanks in step 3. So it kind of leads from one to the next. If you remember to write the blank, then the step 3 is easier to remember because we get to fill it in now. Okay? You don't just leave a blank there. Okay? How do we know what to put on the blank though? Okay, take b over 2, so -2 divided by 2, and we get -1. Does -1 go on the blank? What happens? We have to square it first. What is -1 times itself? +1. Now 1 goes on the blank. Now what do you do in step 4? We factor it. So what this left side, what are we going to put for our factor? A minus 1. We do the variable a and then half of b, so -1. And we square that. Is equal to what's 4 plus 1? 5. Now from here we solve like we would have before. And so we have the square term isolated already, right, Devin? Okay. And then what are we going to do to get to undo the square? Square root it.
That was weird. You did like a thing, but then you did it too close, and then we ran up into straight line. It was really cool.
Good luck. A minus 1 is equal to positive or negative square root of 5, because we don't know what the square root of 5 is. It's not a perfect square, okay? What do we do from here? Add 1. A is equal to 1 plus or minus square root of 5. Questions on that one?
I got checked and they said I was right, but I was actually wrong. Justin. Yes.
Does it make sense why this would be a negative here?
Sure.
Are you just saying that?
Uh,
Like it actually makes sense to you?
Yeah.
Look at me in the eye and tell me that.
Okay,
So,
I thought it'd be positive because the pot is the plus 1.
okay, that's a common mistake, which is why I want to bring it up. Okay, everyone listen. Make sure we put the right thing in the parentheses. We never go off of just whatever this sign was. To know the sign, we always look at B. Whatever sign B was is whatever sign we'll have in our parentheses. If it's negative, it's negative. If it's positive, it's positive. Whatever sign is there is whatever sign is here. Okay? That's how we know what sign that is. And that's what's going to affect whether it's positive or negative at the end. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Blake.
Oh, no.
Now. So you're just getting ready to catch that. Well. Okay. We're actually going to go ahead listen up. Very specific reason, okay? Because I would rather you guys be able to start your first problem and probably finish your first problem in this time. I would hope so. And most of us will be able to finish it, the first problem in this time. So that way you guys can start it and do that here. And you can ask me questions while you're here. Okay? So I'm not giving you this 5 minutes and saying let's end notes early just for you guys to pack up. I'm doing this so you can work on the first problem. I'm thinking, hey, if we do one less example problem right now in our notes, you guys can get one more problem done right now on your homework. So just saying instead of it's basically like I'm just giving you a little extra work time for that reason, okay? So I want you guys to right now go through and work on this problem right now. Okay? Let me quickly talk about this. On the first eight, when it just says complete the square, on the first eight when it says complete the square, like number 1, for example, has x squared plus 6x, and it just says complete the square for each expression. Is there an equal sign there? No. All it's asking you to do is to figure out what goes on the blank and then to factor. That's all it's asking you to figure out what goes in the blank and then figure out what goes in the factor. That's all it's asking you to do on the first 8. On 9 through 16, it's asking you to continue solving like we did before. And you guys just need the exact answers. I don't need approximate today, just exact. So once again, exact answers, no approximate, okay? So I encourage you guys to do number 1 and then to start on number 9. To do number 1 and start on number 9. And you definitely should get number 1 done. And you probably can get number 9 close to done as well. Yep. You don't have to have the plus 9 here though, because it's already taken care of.
Oh, it's like you just.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So the plus 9 here is good. Here it just doesn't exist anymore. Because this all turned into this.
So yeah. So that you need both.
Yes. Yep. So, if you guys get a perfect square, keep going. But if you don't, then we just stop at our exact. And just like we did here. But if you get a perfect square, you keep going low. Jacob, stop distracting Betsy and work. Boys, stop distracting each other and work. I'm pretty.